So excited.
Yay.
You know what's so funny? When I was looking at some of your videos, maybe more recently, I got a little emotional.
Aw.
How do you hold back emotion? I mean, this is not even part of the question, but I guess like it could be. I mean, there's some emotion I hear in your voice, but do you ever feel like you're gonna sob as you're doing these videos?
Mm, no.
Okay.
Yeah, there are times where it does get emotional and like I'll, get a little bit like verklempt as they say, like a little bit.
Yeah,
But also like I don't normally record these just once. You know what I mean? Like I have to
of
record them
course.
multiple times in order to make sure that it's within 60 seconds or that, I might want to change the way it sounds or, so it's not like, I can't be like artificially like injecting like, crying into something,
Sure, right.
and
But no,
so
but the
like,
emotions, but you feel verklempt, but you just get through. You want to get your point across and share.
yeah, I want to get my point
Okay.
across. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that sometimes emotions are appropriate and there are certain posts that are way more emotional than others. Most of the time when they have to do with current events, then you'll really hear my emotion. But when it's about family and like stories, these are stories that are so old that I've told many times that, even though they're very meaningful to me, they're not necessarily the kind that are going to bring tears to my eyes every time I tell them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still think that's a question that I'll put in there because I was just thinking that because I was getting verklempt. That's the exact word. Well, let
Mhm.
me look at my questions. Yeah, I mean, okay, so a lot's happened, I think, since July 2020, when your first that cooking video was that when it first went viral?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were already
Yeah.
vlogging before that. But I
Hmm.
guess I want to ask you, since that time, how has your experience been? I'm asking you a question that's, I know it's a big, big question, but what's it been like for you since July 2020 and now as the
Yeah.
clean vegan?
It's been unexpected. It's been very rewarding. It's been very eye-opening and transformative. So it's been a lot of different things. I think there are a lot of different ways to convey kind of my experience over the past couple of years. But, I think one way of putting it is when I started TikTok, I had no intention of giving up my practice. I was, a trial lawyer at the time. I had just come off a trial and I was looking for my next new big thing. And I was very focused at that time on making the best out of my legal career and really, putting a lot of focus into that. I was working really hard at the time. So now, fast forward 2 years later, and I'm writing emails to my colleagues, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to be moving to LA in a couple months, so can you just come over to my house so that I can see you guys before I leave?" And by the way, I totally don't miss not going into work.
Oh my God, wait, so you're moving to LA? Oh,
Yeah, I'm
okay.
moving to LA. That's why I'll actually be there in a couple months. And so I'm moving to LA. And so I still have to check my email. I still work for the firm on an of counsel basis. So I check my emails and I stay connected with my firm, but I'm not, drafting briefs and arguing motions and the like. And I don't miss it like at all. I love that I'm able to do what I'm passionate about right now. And I think that's a huge change in anybody's life. And it was a very unexpected one in mine. And I very much feel like, I don't know, sometimes I feel guilty. You know what I mean? Like I feel guilty that like I get to do what I love every single day because I know that most people don't. And, I remember I had to sit down with my therapist at one point and I was like, should I really go for this? I feel like I'm not allowed to because I'm supposed to be like my parents. I have to work really, really hard and I have to hate my job and I have to, struggle and suffer, 9 hours of the day and then get a couple hours where I might be a little bit happy, but really, really tired. And that's supposed to be my life because that's everybody else's life. Why should I have a totally different life? And she was like, no, you get to do this if you want to do it.
Wow. Okay. I got to stop being verklempt. And maybe because it's Friday and I've had a rough week. Well,
Oh,
yeah, no, that's awesome. No, and first of all, moving to LA. So what's your reason for moving to LA? I'd love to hear more about that. That's a huge move.
it is. It's a huge move. And there are a lot of reasons. I think that sometimes when people make big life decisions, there's one thing that really pushes them. And for example, people always ask me, well, why did you go vegan? And I'm like, well, there's like 70 reasons why I went vegan, and it's not one thing. But there are some people for whom, no, literally it's one thing. My doctor told me I was going to die of heart disease, so it's that one thing. But it's the same thing with LA. There isn't really one reason. There are so many reasons. I mean, the original thought for going to LA was, again, just kind of like on a whim. I was looking to move to a much larger home in the suburbs in Chicago. And the reason for that was because I need a bigger space with lots of natural light. For my work, because a lot of my work is videography and photography, and I work with natural light. So I wanted to move to the suburbs, and I was looking in like Winnetka and, Lake Forest, Glencoe, that kind of area. And we were driving through LA while I was there for a podcast that I was doing last summer. And I had my Zillow open, and my Zillow automatically started looking for homes in the actual location where we were driving. And I was like, oh, look at all these little homes popping up for rent. And I was like, these aren't really that bad. Like, we could afford this. Like, this isn't too far off from what I, would have spent in Chicago. And, and then we passed a university, and my husband is a professor, and it's like, Anthony could get a job at this university. And so this kind of seed had been planted. And then I had the podcast. I met, with, Ritual, who's like, one of my heroes, and did the podcast with him. I met a bunch of other people, fell in love with sort of the community there. And also, Jeannie, like, Chicago isn't always the most health focused place in the world, and like fitness and health is really important to me and my husband. And it was just nice for a while to be in a place where I can find anything I want to eat, like within a stone's throw,
Yeah,
whether
LA.
it's Korean food, whether it's, vegan food. It's just so much easier than Chicago. And so like, and then finally, of course, the weather, it's just, especially right now in Chicago, it's like gross. But like all of these things sort of combine, like community, ease, fitness, weather. And then of course it would be better for my career, where things are headed. So it's just kind of was like, let's just do it. It's an adventure. I'm 42. I've never lived anywhere else other than Chicago. Let's try it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually a little envious, of course, because of the weather, but then I'm on the East Coast where the winters are pretty mild, so it's not too bad. But I
Mhm.
hear you. So yeah, so it was meant to be the Zillow popping up.
I
That's kind of funny
know.
how it just, that stuff, right? How it just pops up
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, I know I was just searching for that on Amazon. But no, that's super exciting. So I was just looking at your tagline because I love that. Did that just come easy for you? I mean, it makes sense to me. You veganize food and you Korean food, sorry, and then you Koreanize everything. So I want to talk about breaking down that meaning, because the Koreanize is what I want to focus on, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going
Yeah.
to be honest with you, because this is a lot about our Korean culture and where it's going to publish. And I struggled a little bit growing up being Korean American, as a lot of us have that experience.
Yeah.
So Koreanizing stuff was not ever in my vocabulary till I became, I would say in the last 10, 15 years after I had my
Mm,
kids, actually. So I
mm.
wanted to know what that was like for you, as in, was it a journey getting there, or from the get-go, you were like, this is me?
No, it was definitely a journey. And everybody's journey is unique, of course. And I'm not saying that my point of view or my experience is, the only legitimate one, or even a very, prevalent one. But I think that it is in some ways one that many people can relate to. And that was, I really didn't understand my Korean-ness. Like it was in some ways taken for granted, right? Because it was the first language I spoke. I didn't know how to speak English. So I had to go through that whole thing. Even though I was born and raised in Chicago, I was raised by my grandmothers and they didn't speak English. So I didn't speak English, And so like it was in some ways taken for granted. But then as soon as I, collided into whiteness, I was very unhappy that I didn't conform. Why don't I look like everybody else? Why am I not speaking the same freaking language as them? That was horrible. Why am I eating like weird random food? Why am I not wearing the same clothes? I didn't want to be different. I wanted to be just like everybody else. I think that is a very natural feeling for young people. And in my house, it was encouraged, right? In some ways, because my parents also didn't want me to stick out either. They wanted me to assimilate in many ways. And so for such a good chunk of my childhood, I, really didn't have a connection with my Korean-ness. I slowly stopped speaking Korean and only spoke English. Again, that was heavily encouraged by my parents because they wanted me to do well in school. We were only watching English speaking television. And, while of course we still ate pretty much only Korean food at home, of course, at school, I wanted to eat ham sandwiches and bagels and croissants and French fries and pizza and all these horrible things for you. Um, so it was like very much like that. And it wasn't really until I got to college when I started really missing my home. And all of those things that I had taken for granted, now I realized were incredibly valuable to me. I actually minored in Asian American studies in college. I think partly because I realized that this is like a big thing for me, a bigger thing than I had ever given it credit for. So when I came up with the blog, which again, I started the Korean Vegan because in many ways I felt that my decision to go vegan might threaten my Korean-ness. And I didn't want that. And I was adamantly opposed to it. And so I was like, okay, is it possible to live a more compassionate life and have a more compassionate diet while also maintaining my connection to my Korean-ness? And I said, I'm going to try it. So that is why I veganize Korean food, right? But then the Koreanize everything else is really two things. Number one, it's more culinary. I can't help but add Korean ingredients to like everything that I make. I
Yeah.
just feel like everything tastes better with some type of chang. So
Yeah.
I'm always adding, stuff like that. But then on top of that, it's like, well, anything that I make is inherently going to have some Korean in it because I'm Korean, it like just flows through my fingers. I can't prevent that and I shouldn't try to.
Mm. You said something that I really liked was you thought the Korean vegan, being vegan or going vegan would take away from your Koreanness. Can you explain a little bit why you were thinking that or what brought that on? Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, I think so this is something that I've been thinking a lot about the past week, I would say. Like I know that there are some people out there, whether they're rude enough to say it to my face or won't say it to my face because they're typically Asian and won't confront me with it, is that they don't think that I'm very Asian and I'm very Korean, and that they think that I'm just, basically colonized is one way people will say it, and that my diet is whitewashing. That's what it is, or in some way a weird sort of cultural appropriation of my own culture, I guess. So I think that there are people who believe that. Actually, I know that there are people who believe it because they've told me that. And I think that it's so frustrating because for me, it's like I've spent basically since college, like I've spent my whole life trying to eradicate racism and create more representation for AAPI members. And so my decision to adopt a diet that was more consistent with my views on my own health and climate change, and of course my love of animals, which is something that I've had since I was a little girl, it shouldn't have anything to do with cultural appropriation or whitewashing. But I know people think that. And the reason I know people think that is not only because people have said that to me, but also because I thought that, like when my white boyfriend told me he was going to go vegan and wow, wouldn't it be great if you went vegan with me? I was like, I can't go vegan. I'm Korean. Like, what are you even talking about? And like, by the way, how insensitive of you, white guy, to ask me to give up my culture. You know, I don't like, you might be okay with giving up your culture, but I'm not okay with giving up mine. You don't know anything about it, you know? And
Did you
that was
break up
sort
with
of my
them?
attitude. We almost
Well, obviously you
did.
did because you're married to someone else, but
No, that is
oh,
my boyfriend.
oh, that's your
Yeah.
husband. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's my next question. But yeah, okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So
So,
then
I mean,
yeah, how'd you
yeah. So
reconcile
we got into a lot of fights about it.
that?
And I think it would have been totally different if a Korean person had asked me to do that. Because then I would have said, okay, at least this person understands what they're asking me to give up
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah,
But I don't think Anthony did. And it caused a big rift in us. But I felt at the time that I valued him in my life more than I valued fried chicken sandwich. So, you know, I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try going vegan. It will help with our relationship. And I refuse to give up my Korean-ness. So I'm going to start this blog that encourages me to figure out ways to make this work. And that's really how it all happened. But, you know, honestly, like, that's why I felt threatened about it, because I thought too that veganism was kale salads, quinoa sandwiches, you know, cauliflower rice. I
yeah,
mean, like
yeah.
these types of things, which
That's
I
still
felt
the view out there, but obviously, we're knowing a lot more now through you and other vegans, right? So obviously not.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's super cool. So of course I'm gonna ask about your husband because so I didn't know he's the one who started out vegan, but I have to
Mhm.
ask, how has this, because I'm a family therapist, so I believe in the family system. So
Mhm.
what's it been like for him to watch you kind of go, oh my God, look, hey, how dare you tell me to be vegan? And then now you're the famous Korean vegan. What's that been like for you guys, for
It's
your
been
relationship?
Yeah, it's been really great. I was right. Like he told me at the time when he went vegan, he's like, "No, you don't have to go vegan too. I won't judge you. Like I'll still, you know, blah blah blah. Everything will still be the same. I'll just eat differently." And I'm like, "No, I know you. Like I know you. There are some people for whom that might work, but I know you, and that's not going to work for you." And so I kind of could, and he kept, "No, it'll be fine." And I was like, "No, it's not going to be fine." And sure enough, like 2 months later, he was like, "Yeah, I would have broken up with you if you hadn't gone vegan." You know, so
Because it's a
like
lifestyle,
it is
you know?
so much more than like, because health is such a value for him, like, you know, it would have been very difficult for him to be with somebody who didn't understand the impact of eating meat on somebody's body, you know? And so he just like he would have lost all respect for me, I feel like. But you know, but be that as it may, like, so uh, it has brought us immensely closer together. Now we feel like we have a much like a shared vision of what it means to live an effective, productive, impactful life.
Mhm.
You know, and that's nice. I mean, it's convenient to have similar values in that way. I think in terms of just my career and how it's taken off, I really couldn't have I couldn't have found a partner who is more willing to be like, hey, it's all you know. I was previously with a partner who I couldn't be too successful because it threatened him, and it threatened his sense of self and pride. And you know, and ultimately it you know, we didn't make it work, right? But
Mhm.
with Anthony, it's like the more I shine, the more he shines, you
Mhm.
know? And I've never felt for 1 second, not even an iota of a second, that he felt threatened by my success.